Okay, good afternoon. Yes, welcome. Thank you very much. This is the final session of the day. Nice and cozy. It's about 6, 7 of us. It's excellent. Thank you so much. It's entitled Safeguarding Your Digital Fort, Industry-Specific Cyber Essentials for Business Security. So thank you so much for coming along. By all means, put anything on social media. Use the hashtag Wales Tech Week. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, with our first session at 10 o'clock here at the business support stage. Now then, I'm going to ask, first of all, Professor Pete Burnap from the Cyber Innovation Hub to come up and say a few words, a few introductory words, and then the session will be chaired by Paul Peters, and Paul is the Director of the Cyber Resilience Centre and a temporary detective superintendent, I believe. So, first of all, please welcome Professor Pete Burnap.
Afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Pete Burnap. I'm Professor of Data Science and Cybersecurity at Cardiff University, where I'm also the Director of the Cyber Innovation Hub, who are proud sponsors of this session. So at the Cyber Innovation Hub, we're all about upskilling your workforce with short, bite-sized cyber skills and building the next generation of cyber solutions to keep businesses safe and secure. So this session is all about building your digital fort and how to keep yourself safe and secure. And really no better person to give you an introduction to this than the director of the Wales's Cyber Resilience Centre, which is all about being out there providing the information that people need in digestible and useful ways, and effectively preventing people from being low-hanging fruit that keeps the whole of Wales more safe and secure. So he's going to give you a few words, I believe, and then we'll go into a panel session and discussion around this. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul Peters. Over to you, Paul.
Good afternoon. So yes, my name's Paul Peters. I'm a Detective Superintendent. I guess I came into the cyber world probably 2014 when I had an opportunity to set up the regional cybercrime unit. So that's very much where I sort of get my sort of experience from, is leading investigations into cybercrime. So yeah, I don't do cyber. So probably about a year ago now, I was up in Wrexham and I turned up to a co-working location, and there was a lady who was already in the room, and as I'm setting up, she turns to me and she says, so what are you here for then? So I said, well, I've come up to sort of run a workshop on cybercrime and, you know, help you protect your business against cyber criminals. And she looked straight at me and she said, I don't do cyber. I thought, well, that's an odd one. So I couldn't help myself and ask her a couple of questions. So I said, what about your marketing? Do you do your marketing online? She said, yeah, I do my marketing online. I said, yeah. Your CRM, is that online? Yeah, that's online. Your accountancy package, is that online? Yeah, that's online. So I said, you use emails? Yeah. I can see you using a laptop. So I said, I'm here to talk to people like you and try and help you, you know, improve your cyber resilience. My argument didn't really have the right effect because she got up and walked out. And I'm still hoping to sort of bump into her one day in an event like this where she finally realises that cyber is for everybody. And I guess the point of that story is that we can no longer say I don't do cyber, and it doesn't matter whether you're a chief executive, whether you're working in procurement, whether you're working in HR. We all using computers. Therefore, the cyber affects everybody. So, you know, when we talk about cyber hygiene, that's something we all need to take on board and sort of maybe move away from the attitude of, you know, actually I don't do cyber. So one of the other sort of things I see or I hear sort of in my role is, why on earth would a hacker attack me? You know, I'll give you one example, a small business in Carmarthen, that was their very comment to me, nobody's going to bother me, I'm a sole trader in Carmarthen. 3 months later, he emailed me to say all his files had been encrypted and could I help him. And what we're about is trying to sort of provide some really sort of basic advice to sort of help people not fall into that trap. So, you know, we hear about the big hacks. Last year there was the Colonial Pipeline, you know, affecting oil going across the country. You know, Tesco's have been hit. And then the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office, if I had to list 1,000 sort of possible targets within Wales, I don't think I'd have put them on my list. So it really can happen to everybody. And these are just some examples of some small businesses that they operated on Instagram, but they were still vulnerable, and therefore the hackers took advantage of that, and that meant their accounts were compromised. So, you know, it doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, if the vulnerability exists, then you're at risk of being attacked by a cyber criminal. So, just briefly, I'm just going to run through, you know, why these threats or what these threats are. Any business or organization will have some sort of data, and that data is valuable. So you need to put things in place to protect that data. We hear about business email compromise. An example I've got of a charity, quite a reasonably sized charity. The CEO of that charity unfortunately clicked on a link that she shouldn't have. It downloaded malware onto her system, and basically what the hackers did was waited, and they had access to her Outlook account, all her email. They knew when she was going on holiday. The day she went on holiday, they emailed the finance department to say, you need to pay £20,000 to these account details. Sorry, sending this email in a rush. Could you get it done as soon as possible? So invariably, boss has sent an email, make this payment. They made the payment. It was to the criminals. So these things happen, and they're easy to fall for. And there's various other types of malware that exist that sometimes can sort of harvest your credentials, for example, and then there's ransomware, which, so if you don't know what ransomware is a type of malware that will encrypt all your data. So basically you can't access it, and you have to pay the criminals a ransom in order to get access back. And then it's another conversation as to whether or not you actually get the right codes to get your data back, or whether you get another request for more money or cryptocurrency. So they're sort of the main cyber threats I would suggest towards businesses, and the way that these are generally delivered is through the phishing email. So a phishing email, I'm sure we all get these quite regularly. Quite often they're sort of very poorly crafted, you know, the grammar is pretty poor, but we're seeing more and more sort of complexity in how these phishing emails are crafted. And what the criminal will do is actually research quite often. They will research what's out there in that public domain, which is why, got ahead of myself there, which is why it's so important to be able to recognize a phishing email. So what we try and do at the Cyber Resilience Centre is take real examples as to what would happen. So, for example, this is an email that came into our business, basically saying there was a remittance attached. Funnily enough, that morning I had a conversation with somebody we work with to say, could you send through an invoice? And then this arrived. I mean, if I'm honest, it didn't take me too long to realise this was a phishing email. But what really sort of struck me was, you know, obviously I probably had the same urge as most people to click on that attachment and just see what happens, which clearly is not something you should be doing. But what I did was I worked then with South Wales Police, and I said, look, can you open this in a controlled environment and just show me what would happen? So I can then go, I'm frequently telling people don't click on the link, but actually, quite often I don't know what's at the end of the link. So they did a bit of work for me, and basically this is what would have come up. Log into Office 365. So if you're using Office 365, it looks pretty genuine. Put your details in. They then have your password and your logon details, and off that was going to a server somewhere in Europe. And the criminals will have lists of these compromised accounts, and they'll be selling them. They'll be looking to use them. So it's as easy as that. So if you were unsuspecting, as you know, on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock when your mind is turning elsewhere, and that email comes through, you still need to be vigilant because it's easy to fall for these things. And what is phishing? A phishing email is a type of social engineering. So I've put up the definition from the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's manipulating people into carrying out specific actions or divulging information that's of use to an attacker. So the way they will do this, they'll research your social media, they will look at your websites, they will know how humans behave. You know, if it's an email from the taxman, most of us want to sort of check that actually we don't want any sort of more tax bills coming through. We want to stay on the right side, or maybe we're hoping for that sort of we've overpaid the tax and we're going to get a refund. But you know, so it's important, and the criminals play on that sort of and that's what they use. And sorry. So that's something that I really think we need to be sort of conscious of. So haven't got an awful long time to sort of speak about sort of more intricate sort of cyber protections you can put in place, but I wanted these discuss these sort of considerations for you, and consider what information both you share and what your organisation shares, because that's what the hackers will use if it's out there. And I appreciate you have to share some information, but being aware of what information you're sharing makes you more alert to that threat. Awareness and training is crucial. The phishing emails move on. We're seeing more and more sort of Welsh language emails constructed, which certainly 3 or 4 years ago I'd never heard of. So it's important to keep up to date, keep focusing on the different sort of methodology used, and really sort of encourage your staff and anybody that works within your organisation to sort of keep on top of that knowledge. Have policies and procedures in place. So if you are hit with a ransomware, for example, how are you going to cope? How's that going to affect your business continuity? And that doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter how big your organization is. That's important because we all want to sort of continue and be able to sort of continue operating. And once you've got the policies and procedures in place, test them. There's tools on the NCSC website which will help you test your organization. There's something called Exercise in a Box, which is for very small organizations as well as larger organizations. So it's there, it's available for you to test your organization. And also just think about who you're buying from, who you're selling to, and what cybersecurity sort of awareness that they have, because what you don't want is for your supplier's account to be compromised, and then they're actually sort of telling you from a genuine account to send your money to another bank account, because you're going to be stuck with that bill. So that's sort of the threats. A little bit about what support now is out there. So I run the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales. It's a full-time job for me as a police officer. We work with academia, we work with private sector, and our aim is really simple, is to improve cyber resilience across Wales with a particular focus on small businesses, micro businesses, third sector organisations. So what we look to do is provide non-jargon, really simple to understand guidance. The way we do that is we have a membership, so you can sign up for a free membership. We're not after any money, and that's a police officer telling you, not a salesman. We're not after any money, and you are then able to sort of have our welcome pack, which gives you a variety of information, but also a monthly newsletter where we'll talk about the threats that we are seeing. We also have students that we've recruited from across universities in Wales, and we use those to provide what I would call sort of the lower end cybersecurity services. So for instance, staff awareness training, and for instance, a vulnerability assessment of your website or something like that, which we're able to offer at a discounted price because we are using students. And I hasten to add, the students do go through a development program. We don't just release them onto people's networks and say, do your worst. It's a structured process. So the other thing that we're happy to sort of come out and talk to business groups and really very much sort of focus on what support that we can offer businesses and charities across Wales. And then the last sort of thing I sort of wanted to touch on was the importance of reporting. So I read a report quite recently that says only 1 in 10 of businesses and organisations report cybercrime to the police. Now, if I give you an analogy, I guess, if in your sort of if you live in an estate where there's been a number of burglaries, everybody phones the police and says, "I've just been burgled." Probably because we want the a crime number for insurance, I know, but we do tell the police about burglaries. And then what happens? Police think, well, there's been a number of burglaries in that area, we need to do something. So we'll have extra uniform patrols walking around, we might have some plainclothes patrols, we might have some operations against some potential sort of burglars to see whether it's them. We'll talk to the council, maybe some additional CCTV, additional lighting in the area. All these things happen because people have reported that crime. If you don't report cybercrime, how on earth are we going to be able to get the resources to actually sort of devote more and more of our efforts into solving that? So it's a real plea, really. And some of the things that you will get if you do report cybercrime to the police is we're impartial. We're not out to sort of gain anything from this. If you're talking to the private sector, they probably have an eye on profit making. We're not there to make a profit. We're there as policing to sort of support you and investigate the crime. We have an intelligence database, so we may know stuff about the strand of ransomware, for example, that can help you with your decision making. I have to sort of temper this, but we do have police negotiators who can potentially get involved, but that has to be as part of our sort of investigative strategy. So I'm not promising a negotiator for every single cybercrime, but they are there and they are trained. And also, we have access to cryptocurrency support. So quite often, if you've been blackmailed by a cyber criminal, they will want their payment in cryptocurrency. So we are able to sort of work with a large national company who now have the ability to trace that cryptocurrency and potentially to recover it. So again, this real sort of benefits from reporting cybercrime. And there's the ethical part, I would say, of alerting the wider community. So if there's a trend of particular types of cybercrime that are being reported, if the police know, we can alert the rest of the business community so more and more victims don't, more and more people don't fall victim to this. We also have what's called the Police Protect Network, and they can provide things like a phishing platform, so you can test your organisation as to whether or not people would fall for a phishing email, and that is free. It was funded by Welsh Government a few years back, and still exists. And there's various types of exercising that can be done. Some's quite fun, other stuff probably a little bit more serious, and that's sort of available to sort of businesses and organisations across Wales. And there is also something called police cyber alarm. So if you have a network, it's probably aimed at more medium-sized companies. You can have something that sits outside your network and monitors the traffic to see whether or not it's malicious, and then provides both your business and the police the intelligence on the type of attacks that are taking place. I should mention action fraud. That's the place where you report cybercrime. If it's an in-progress crime, there's a phone number, and phone the number, because then you'll go directly through to a policing unit. So, am I missing a slide? I think I am. So there should have been another slide, and that was basically a quote by a young lad who I investigated a couple of years ago for attacking his own college. He was very good at attacking his own college. He then went on to sort of attack organisations across the world. We sort of investigated him. We arrested him whilst he was on bail to me. He then attacked TalkTalk, and I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago where TalkTalk was hacked. He was basically he pleaded guilty. Ultimately, once the investigation was complete, went to prison. He's now out of prison, and he was interviewed by an online magazine, and one of the things, and I can't quote it verbatim, and the slide is missing, probably my fault, but one of the things he said is if people put in place the simple measures in an effective way, then he couldn't have done what he did. So therefore, if you've got a hacker that's telling you, have strong password security, put the training in place so people recognize phishing emails, back up your data. If he's telling you to put all these things in place, to me it makes sense to actually do that. So I'll finish there as part of my presentation. I've got no idea how much time I just took, but hopefully we're roughly on track. And then I guess we'll move to the panel. Okay, so yes. So we've got two really experienced guests joining us on the or joining me on the panel. So if I come to you first, Claire, could you just tell me a little bit about your background and your organisation?
Hello, I'm Claire Johnson. I'm a cyber capability consultant for an organisation called ITSUS Consulting. My background is primarily in education. So I used to work at the University of South Wales and ran the cyber department teaching team there for a number of years. I also run a Women in Cyber network that operates throughout Wales.
And if we can move on to David, if you can tell us a little bit about your background and organisation.
I don't know if I'm speaking too loud into this or not, so do tell me if I'm not, if I am. So my name's Dave Teague, and I head up the Information Commissioner's Office in Wales. For those of you who don't know us, we're the nasty guys that go around finding people when they lose our data. That's, of course, very cynical, but that's just a part of what we do. But the main reason we're here is we want to help businesses, we want to help organizations get that right. Cyber is a key area whereby, if you like, the human element of a data breach or a cyber attack comes to fore. How many of us here today have got our data stored somewhere and we trust an organization to do that? I would imagine it's all of us. We've got so much stuff in the cloud, we've all got mobile phones. I can see some of the mobile phones here today. They are there and they are being used and storing our data. When that goes wrong, it's personal data that the Information Commissioner is interested in, and we can take action against organisations that haven't taken the measures that they should have done in order to prevent that data being attacked and accessed.
Thanks, David. So if I stick with yourself, David, we often hear about successful cyber attacks on TV, on the news, etc. But what impact do you see cyber attacks having on people?
I think they can be a lot more debilitating than people often take it credit for. You hear cyber attack and you think that's a victimless crime. It's just computers, it's just numbers and money being transferred. That's not the case. Has anybody here been a victim of a data breach? I can remember back in the olden days of 2005, I think it was, when the Department for Work and Pensions had CDs containing, it was CDs, remember compact discs? That sounded a bit like Peter Kay there with a microphone saying, do you remember? But they had about 3 compact discs, 25 million child benefit claim records were on those discs. They had to send them to another part of the government. They sent them. Those discs didn't arrive. And so about 3 weeks later, somebody thought, oh, we haven't had those discs. They were contacted and they leapt into action and just sent 3 more. Exactly in the same way. Didn't take any steps. This was a long time ago. We've come a long way since then. But there were 25 million people. All of a sudden, their bank account details, who knew where they were? And that's where we come into play. We do take that into account when we're investigating data breaches. We look at the real impact on organizations. It's not just about data breaches and cyber attacks. It's about marketing, some of the marketing campaigns that we get as well. There are people that have real repercussions of these things. It is nowhere near a victimless attack at all. And that's something that we've seen in our investigations.
And I know I mentioned TalkTalk earlier, and yes, there was the big breach of TalkTalk data, but what that led to was that data being used then by criminals to contact real people like you and me, and then conduct frauds on them. And quite often they were quite vulnerable people who these frauds were sort of perpetrated against. So it has a real sort of human impact.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Sorry, Paul. With TalkTalk, is that Paul's talked about the cyber attack that caused the breach. What we got involved with was what measures TalkTalk had put in place to prevent that breach from happening. And what happened was TalkTalk had acquired a company and acquired their servers. They didn't look and didn't do their due diligence on those servers, which left their systems exposed. And because they didn't take those steps, we were able to, I think, then when it was issued, it was £400,000 fine. It would be a lot more now under GDPR because we can fine up to 20 million, as we know. We don't do fines unless there's real need. And as Paul says, the human element to that was one of the factors that we took into account.
So Claire, a term that's often used in cybersecurity conversations is defence in depth. Can you tell us a little bit about what that actually means?
Yeah, sure. So defence in depth is like a raft of measures that you can put into place to protect yourself. So if you think of it in terms of your home, And you were talking earlier on about sort of that neighbourhood watch almost type thing. That would be one of those defences. But also, you would lock your door when you go out. You might have a security light that lights up your drive if somebody walks up it. You might keep all your really important documents in a safe. So all those measures, when they're in place, help protect you in that if somebody was to attack you and get through one of those defences, so perhaps they walk up your drive and you've forgotten to lock your front door, I'm guilty of that myself, is that actually then the house alarm would go off anyway because I've set the alarm before I left. So using all those techniques can really help make a difference. And actually a lot of them are very, very simple. So, Paul was talking about some of the sort of more basic measures that you can put in place, and you talked about them on those servers at TalkTalk. They're simple things, but together they help protect you in a much more effective way than just technical controls, for example.
So, I mean, the way I think of it in my mind is if you think, I think Caerphilly Castle is an example. We've got the different walls, the different sort of concentric walls, and that's, just prevent people, the attackers from if they get past the first wall, they've got another wall to get past. So if I sort of put that into really simple terms then, so password security, for example, your first wall is to have it as a complex password. And then your second wall might be to have two-factor authentication in place.
Yeah, but also then if you think about the people that are using the technology in your company, is that education piece around them. So if they have all those measures in place, but then they get those phishing emails, that because they're aware of what a phishing email looks like, of not clicking on something because it looks urgent or because it's got a link embedded in it, not opening that PDF, those are things then that just add to that layer of defence.
Thanks. So are there any questions from you guys out there that you want to sort of put to the panel? Got-
Sorry, you were saying that you've been to Wrexham. So this is a national kind of task that's been set up for yourself that you oversee.
Yes, so we're part of a network of centres. You've got, they basically combine with, so police have collaborations, which they call regional organised crime units. So they're generally along those lines, except for in Wales, where we cover the whole of Wales. So yeah, as long as you're this side of Offa's Dyke, we're available. And if you're the wrong side of that, then obviously there's other centres available to sort of provide the same sort of service. So, well, I've got a couple of questions if nobody else.
So with your example at the start, with people saying I don't do cyber, that kind of stuff. So if you can break through that and sort of get them to understand in an SME or one or two person band that cyber is important, what's the biggest blocker that stops them being able to fix the problem?
I think a lot of it is around the terminology that's used. And I think that word cyber is a challenge because everybody hears the word cyber and I think that's for the techie. That's not for me. And what I'm trying to say is, no, that is for everybody. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any sort of thoughts on that as well in your roles.
Yeah. I mean, we do quite a bit of work with public sector, so local authorities, and most of our work is around the IT department and helping them sort of have secure firewalls and secure Wi-Fi. And actually, it's a much bigger thing than that. What we really want to see is that the senior management have bought into cybersecurity as well, and that they're taking it seriously, and that they're looking at it from a strategic perspective. So they're not just thinking about those technical controls, but they're thinking about the training, they're thinking about their strategy, their vision, they're thinking about what their important data is that they really need to protect. So not just the sort of everything needs to be secured, but actually what's the bottom line? If something went wrong, where is that data held? How have they got it backed up? How do they get back to it, and so on?
And I'll come to you now, David, but one thing that also strikes me is that a lot of, we're talking about your smaller micro companies now, a lot of them just don't think it's going to happen to them. And I see it is happening. And that's the challenge because, as I said earlier, somebody I spoke to who was a sole trader in Carmarthen said, why on earth is anybody, one, have they heard of Wales? Two, why would they choose a sole trader in Carmarthen? Well, it's because the vulnerability exists. And that's the difficulty that we have in getting through. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are, it's actually about the vulnerabilities, and you can prevent some of those vulnerabilities with simple steps. Sorry, David.
I was just going to add that under data protection law, GDPR, or UK GDPR as it is now, you have a duty to take technical and organisational measures. Now, the technical would normally cover the IT side, as Paul and Claire have alluded to. The organisational side is the human side of it. And that's where social engineering comes in. It's the manipulation of humans, the giving up data, giving access to the technical side of things. And in the olden days, before we had computers, we had locked doors. Well, the easiest way to get somebody to unlock a door was to get two glasses of water and your leg in plaster, and somebody eventually will open that door for you. And that's the human side of a breach. You can do that in technical terms as well, and that's a really, really important thing. We expect those. It does extend then to education. It does extend to training. If you don't train your staff, if you don't train your team, and they've got access to that data, then that is a risk that must be mitigated somehow. And we would expect you to do that. We'll touch on some of the things that are available later, no doubt, on that side.
Any questions from the audience?
One of our customers has just been a victim of a ransomware attack, and I was just wondering what we should do to make sure that we have not been put at risk by what's happened to them.
Probably come to you. Claire, is that?
Of that fast book. Yeah, so this is all about supply chain, isn't it? And making sure your supply chain is secure. What can you do? Well, I guess the first thing to do is have a conversation with them about sort of what the breach involves, what sort of data's been involved, and how they are moving forward from that. So making sure your defences are all in the right place. So, you can protect yourself. So even if some of those links have been compromised, the fact that you've got everything set up as it should be will help. I would also think actually raising awareness amongst the company that there has been a breach in the supply chain, because that will actually raise awareness amongst everybody within the organisation that they need to be extra vigilant at this point. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Paul.
I suppose just one of the key things is backing up your data or ensuring you've got backups. I don't know if you're in that position where you do have the backups, but clearly that's something which we always sort of recommend to any sort of business. Ensure you have those backups in place. So if you do have the worst case scenario, you've got an option that's, you can go to your backups and then hopefully quite quickly be able to sort of get back to that sort of stable business continuity side of things. So, David, do you have it?
Yeah, and if that data that is being impacted is personal data of individuals, then you may have a duty to report that to us as well as a data breach. Now, we've got a data breach team. We've also got a helpline within the Wales team as well, so we understand the different circumstances we might work in Wales. So you can give us a call for advice on that side, but it's something that is a mandatory requirement under the UK GDPR as well. So.
Any other questions? Or I've got a couple, if not. So Claire, a phrase we often use at the Cyber Resilience Centre is that security is everyone's responsibility. So would you say that people are in the weakest link? Would you say that people are the weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity?
My view is very much that people are our best link in cybersecurity, because it's the people that hold the keys to the data. So if everybody, and if you think in an organisation, it's only a very small number of people who are responsible for IT security in terms of the technical aspects of it. But the organisation as a whole is full of people doing their jobs day in, day out. And what we don't want those people to do is to say, cyber's not my problem, I don't do cyber. We want them very much to be, I do cyber, I operate securely, I'm aware of the risks, I don't understand all the technology behind it, and that's fine. But I know if I get a phishing email, or if I get an email that looks in the least bit dodgy, I'm going to go and speak to someone and say, is this okay to click on this link? Can you check it for me in that safe environment before I open it up? And those really are the key to the defence of the organisation. I mean, we get phishing emails at work just like everybody else everybody else does. And sometimes they're very, very well crafted. But we had one come in recently saying, oh, can you update my bank account details? Click here, I've sent all the info. And my colleague said, I'm just going to delete it. And I said, no, don't just delete it, report it, because then somebody else in the organisation who hasn't got the insight, who perhaps isn't aware that that email could be potentially threatening, won't get that email because it will be withdrawn from our system. So I think, in answer to the question, people are absolutely critical in securing your organisation and securing your data, and in reporting and making sure that everything is as safe as it can be.
I think I'm in agreement with Claire on that, but I would also add that we look at an organisation's duty. So whilst an organisation has duty towards its employees as well, and that's where, if you think of the recent breach with the Police Service of Northern Ireland, which I'm sure you've heard of, that's been in the press, somewhere, if you according to the press stories on that side of things, an individual would have clicked send on that email that exposed the data of the police officers there. And that's a lot of pressure to be putting on an individual. Now, we're not really interested in individual errors, but we would be looking at an organisation's duties around what they train that individual into do as well, before, but also assessing the impact of that, which is tremendous, as you'll know there. So I think that the human element can be exploited more, but I agree with Claire that humans are also the strength of an organisation.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's part of, probably coming back to your question earlier, Pete, is that's part of our challenge, is to actually make people realise that when we're talking about cybersecurity, you can be talking about something as simple as a password, and making that password strong. And certainly from my experience of investigating cybercrime, yes, there were some really technical attacks, and there's no way I could even sort of explain it to you. But also there was an awful lot of really easy attacks, and down to really bad passwords. In fact, I do recall there was actually one of the investigations where the password was password, and that doesn't protect you. So people are, as well as being your weakest link, they can also be your strongest.
Yeah, and if I can just sort of follow up really on sort of David's comment there about, the training is important, and you want to see the organisation has done that work. I think one of the things I'm always also quite passionate about is making sure that people in the organisation feel fully supported in reporting and acting upon cybercrime. So I think, sometimes we do phishing campaigns and there's almost like that blame culture. Oh, you clicked on the link, you're going to have to go in for some training because you didn't do the right thing. Actually, we really want people to sort of be aware and to feel comfortable in saying, I think I clicked on something I shouldn't have clicked on. Because it's much better that if somebody makes a mistake, they feel that they're in a safe environment to say, hands up, I've done something I shouldn't have done. I need some help now to fix it. Because that's when we can sort of damage limit, if you like, what the impact of that could be.
I think it's about sharing knowledge and helping each other to gain knowledge around it as well. So, okay. Claire, many organisations will have policies and procedures in place, and I sort of mentioned that in my piece. But is that enough, just to have the policy and procedure in place? And then I'll ask David the same question.
They're a really good start because they show an intention from the organisation to be doing the right thing. But I also think there's a need to actually put them into practice properly. So, for instance, having a business continuity plan or an incident response plan is great, but how do you know it actually works until you try it? So I think things like doing exercising or tabletop discussions where you present a scenario and you say, imagine this has just happened, okay? Let's just really enact it as if it's just happened. What are we going to do? Because I think at that point you really discover where the flaws are, and that's a good thing. You want to discover those flaws before you actually need to fix something. So if you go through that exercising process and say, actually, do you know what? I was going to use the phone book on Teams to contact all the people that I need to contact, and we're saying, but Teams is down and you can't use it. Have you got those numbers stored somewhere else? Well, yeah, maybe they're in the office in the safe, but I can't get into the office because I'm working from home. So how do I get that information to to speak to the people that can do something to sort of, solve the problem. So that exercising piece I think is really important.
And I guess it's important that it's not just those running the IT that are involved in that you open that up to everybody within the organisation.
Absolutely. And, that will include people like marketing people, the people who are going to be talking to the other staff and sort of doing the comms around what's going on and how you manage that effectively. I mean, when you think of some of the sort of like the big talk hacks and some of the sort of bigger breaches, the PR piece around that is crucial to get right, because that can mitigate some of the negative press that will come undoubtedly from it.
David?
I can't really add a lot to that other than they need to be scalable as well. If you're a small organisation, small business, no one's going to expect you to have a raft of 300 fully written policies. It is key that the messages in those policies are delivered to everybody. It is everybody's responsibility to follow those. And I just think with policies and procedures, they're only as good as how much they're known about. With the best will in the world, there's very few of us that will be word perfect on every single one of our employers' policies, myself included. But when we're doing something, we have to be aware those policies at least exist to be able to refer to them. And they're only effective if they can be put into practice and followed in effective ways, like in practical ways like that.
So, David, understanding how you can make yourself more cyber secure can be a challenge. What help is out there?
Well, Paul, thanks for asking that. There is a great deal of help out there. There are lots of organisations such as the Wales Cyber Resilience Centre. We work closely with Paul's team. We've been working quite closely with the Roku and Tarian and Paul's teams for a while now, because it's a really, really valuable insight into the challenges that are being faced by businesses. And we know that particularly data protection is not going to be high on everybody's list, is it? I mean, I've spent 10 years having to try and make data protection sound interesting. It is, but with the best will in the world, people haven't got time to know all they need to know about it whilst they're running a business. So it's about taking basic steps, starting slowly. Cyber Essentials is a great tool. That's certainly something we recommend. The National Cybersecurity Centre's website as well is always a source, and we work quite closely with those. We've produced some handy guides for SMEs, small businesses, as well as large organizations as well. So the websites, there's a huge amount of information out there. And if you have got any worries about that side of things, I would say that's your starting point. Just from an ICO perspective, we do have a Welsh helpline as well that you can give us a shout for. There's so much guidance available out there for you to digest. I would say that, but if you don't know where to start, by all means, give us a call and we'll happily help you wherever we can with that side of things.
Okay, so I think we're probably approaching the end of our allocated slot. So just for you both, if you can give one piece of advice to a new business looking to embed good data protection into their systems, what would it be?
I've got the mic, so I'll go first. I would say to know your data. If you don't know what you've got, you don't know what you're processing and how you're processing it, how can you put measures in place to protect it properly? We expect organizations to put those measures in place when they're using and processing our own data. And if they find that your organizational business isn't putting those measures in place, they may well go elsewhere. You don't want that to happen, but you also don't want other organizations who are processing your data to do the same as well. So know your data and then put appropriate measures in place to protect it.
And I think I would say that if you're really starting from scratch, then the NCSC 10 Steps to Cybersecurity is a good place to start. It just raises your awareness of all the things you should be thinking about in a very simple way, and then you can develop from there.
And I guess I'll just finish up by saying, if you join the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales and become a member, we will help you sort of negotiate your way through the cyber jungle. But thanks very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. Do you mind me asking one question? I was, my social media was hacked through an email. Now, that email looked kosher. It was from someone I thought I knew. To a dummy like me, what should I have been looking out for? That is, I know I'm not, not a big company, obviously, but
Yeah, so I guess firstly, looking at the email itself, is that a genuine email? So has their account been hacked? In which case, it would be the genuine email. But then you want to look at the way they sort of speak, because if you know that person quite well, they normally have sort of ways they say things. Was it addressed to you using your name? Certainly look for sort of grammatical errors and things like that. What I would say, though, is they are becoming more sophisticated, so that's not necessarily a clear indication. If it isn't from a genuine account and they've potentially spoofed it or made it look like, maybe changed one digit in the email address, so at a glance you think it has come from somebody you know, then by sort of hovering over, by looking at that email address, then make sure that that it is actually the correct one. And I guess probably the obvious bit of advice is if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not.
yeah, it's easier said than done, though, isn't it? Really?
It is, and it's only by us sharing our different experiences and what we're seeing that we can then share that with the wider community.
Yeah.
So people are more aware that if this type of email comes in, actually, I read somewhere that that could be a phishing email. So by sort of sharing that information and more of us sort of becoming more aware to it, then that's probably the solution going forward.
I mean, it was a massive pain in the butt, but there we are.
I'm just going to add to that because I think, because I get them as well, and somebody will send you a message on Facebook Messenger saying, look at this picture of us, and I think, why are they sending me a picture of us? I haven't seen this person for 6 months or something. So I would then separately message that person and say, have you sent me a message? And they say, no, I've been hacked. So it's almost like adopting a sort of suspicious
I was
mind.
just going to say, you need to be a suspicious
Unfortunately,
mindset, really.
yeah. But I think that's part of the awareness raising piece, isn't it, that Paul's talking about?
And if they've, I don't know whether you opened an attachment, but think about whether or not they, why are they sending you an attachment, and look at the type of attachment. If it's a JPEG, then possibly that you might expect that from this person. But if it's some other file type that you've never heard of, don't be opening it. So there's other telltale things, and it's about bringing them all together, really.
Sure. I mean, the sadness is that, a sort of half-savvy person like myself could handle it, but my 84-year-old lover, would have been in, wouldn't have recognised what the hell it was, and they would have been in big trouble. Sorry, David, you were just going to say something?
I was going to suggest that there are people who are very vulnerable. We can all adopt suspicious minds, but I'm exactly the same. My mother is on Facebook somehow, but I don't quite know. I don't think she knows how to do it, although she has used Amazon. But the text messaging is another good example. It's another. They've got so many ways into our lives. It's not just email. It's not just Facebook. It's all aspects of social media, all aspects of our digital life. And you have to have that suspicion going right across all those aspects. If I can only agree with that one that said, if you're not expecting it, be suspicious, check. Think, check before you do anything else, because that's the way to deal with it. And if it's we deal with marketing and nuisance calls with marketing, whereby if we get an unknown number, do you answer your phone if it's an unknown number? I don't. If it's that important, they'll go to voicemail. And it's a very similar thing with email and all those other aspects. What's going to happen if you don't reply? Probably nothing. That can help you have that suspicious side. The vulnerable and the people who are digitally excluded as well. We see this a lot, in particular with direct marketing, which can then lead to fraud, and so action fraud. So there is some help that's out there for groups that might be struggling with that. Age Cymru do quite a lot of good stuff as well. We can direct you to those, and we're happy to signpost to those if you've got any specific queries.
Okay. Or we can just ban social media in general.
I think that horse has been bolted already, hasn't it?
Unfortunately. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, the three of you. Round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you very much.